I'm Aubrey Sitterson, and this is SKALD. You're listening to the only story that matters. This is true oral storytelling, written to be performed and then recorded in one single, flawless take. Every episode of SKALD is the best one yet. So don't worry about what you've missed. Instead, just jump right in here. Later on, if you want to find out what happened earlier, you can always check out the previous episodes of the podcast or buy the SKALD prose volumes, available exclusively on Amazon. This isn't me reading you a story. This is me telling you a story. This is SKALD, part 54. The roots have done what? Enleth, Queen Enleth, bellowed at the young dwarf, the one sent by the root master, the one who struggled to catch his breath as he steadied his quivering lower lip. They have broke through, my queen. I was sent. Enleth was enraged, furious to have been interrupted, furious that what had interrupted her was the utter failure of her subjects, and furious that the one thing that could not happen, that must not happen, had happened. Broken through? Broken through? Enleth rose from her ornate throne, and as she did, the dwarf, her retainers, and all those present bent the knee. You mean to tell me that you, the dwarves, the ones assigned to do one thing and one thing only, to keep the world tree from branching outward, to keep it from reaching other worlds, you mean to tell me that you have failed? That you have failed your queen? The young dwarf coughed, desperate to chase away the fear he felt growing inside of him. I'm sorry, my queen. I must have misspoke. It is not our tree. It is not your tree. It is broken through to other worlds. But some other world's tree. It is broken through to ours. Enleth's face, her beautiful, severe, regal face, suddenly drained of anger as her fury was replaced by another expression. Shock. It had been 20 years since she took the throne, since she took her rightful place after her father's death, his assassination, his murder at the hands of the traitorous Maul. But though her elven heritage had slowed her aging, had safeguarded her vitality, it could do nothing to stave off the effects of her decades of rulership. It could do nothing to deprive her of her royal reward, the wrinkles, creases, and lines that remained carved into her stoic, statuesque visage, even after it was no longer contorted with rage. Say that. Say that again. She spoke low and haltingly. The roots, our roots, your roots, they are still under control. But somehow, we don't know when. Speak plainly and quickly. Enleth raised her voice, not in anger, but in a desperation, in a panic that sent a shockwave of fear rippling through the crowd in attendance. The young dwarf swallowed hard. The roots, they're from another world, from another world tree. courtiers gasped and began to whisper amongst themselves, already concocting rumors and absurd explanations for this impossible development. But Enleth remained focused, became even more focused, because she knew exactly what had happened, exactly how it had happened, and exactly who was to blame. The assassin, the murderer, the traitor Maul, and his damnable cudgel broken off from the world tree, the real world tree, her world tree. Something of this magnitude. Enleth sat back down in her throne, preparing herself for the deep thought, preparing to enter the elven trance, the one she used to solve her most pressing, most complex problems. Why didn't your master come himself to deliver this news? Why didn't he come to address his queen? Am I no longer important enough to warrant a visit from the root master? The young dwarf stammered his response. He sent me. He thought, he is needed there, my queen, to help beat back the roots. Seemingly satisfied by the dwarf's answer, Enleth leaned back into her throne once again. And I sincerely hope that he's successful. I sincerely hope that this grievous breach in protocol wasn't made in vain, because if that breach isn't stopped, if the hole isn't closed, I will see it plugged up by your master's corpse. Now go, beat back the roots, and do it quickly. The young dwarf scrambled away, sprinting through the throne room, eager to get back to work, eager to return to his master, eager to obey his queen, and most of all, eager to get away from her. And as he did so, Enleth turned. She looked to her left and gazed upon him, her royal consort, and in name only, barely even that, her king. She should have known better than to look to him for advice, for counsel, or even for support. Because when she gazed upon him, all she saw was a slack-jawed simpleton, unable to parse the dire events that took place before his very eyes. He was of noble, excellent blood. Her advisors had made sure of that. But that blood was deficient. Generations of inbreeding, centuries of idleness, and millennia spent without stress, without pressure, without struggle, the very things that created greatness. They had left her with this sad, simple, useless specimen. King Roland. He'd been chosen to father her children, her royal brood, selected at length by her advisors, who assured her that when combined with her robust royal lineage, his deficient blood would be overwhelmed, cancelled out by the countless exceptional qualities of Enleth's line, the qualities that she had been bred and raised to exhibit upon the throne, upon her throne. Even in that exceptionally simple task, a job so simple that the meanest beasts of the field do it instinctively, her consort, her husband, her king had failed her. He was useless, utterly useless, but still, he was there, and it was important for a queen to have a king. At least that's what her advisors told her, and so she was advised repeatedly to give King Roland tasks which he could easily and successfully accomplish. She leaned in and spoke slowly so that Roland would be sure to understand. I need 5 maniples immediately. Counting off on her fingers so that Roland could clearly see, she continued, take only the finest men and women. I need archers, I need footmen, I need mages, I need war priests, and I need clerics, and only the best of each, Roland. As she sat back, she suddenly remembered the final piece of her new tactical army. Ah, dwarves, dwarves, the hardiest among them, whichever can be spared from their work here. Who knows how big, how strong the tree will have grown by the time we find it. Roland sat, his face scrunched up, repeating his orders to himself silently as he counted on his fingers, a sad, childish imitation of his wife, of his queen. Of course, yes, my dearest, but how many of each? Enleth didn't respond immediately. She had been scolded too many times by her advisors, castigated too often for shouting at Roland in public, for undermining the authority of his throne, and by relation, her own throne, of their ostensibly shared rule. After clenching her eyes shut, after waiting for the rage to subside, she spoke softly, in a trembling, barely contained whisper. 5 maniples, Roland. 5 types of soldiers. 1 maniple of each. Roland smiled, his face lighting up momentarily, before confusion took it once again. But what about the dwarves? Enleth lost her temper. Just do it, Roland! Keenly aware of the eyes upon her, she quickly reined her fury back in. Just please, do it. However many the root master can spare. Just figure it out and do it quickly. My king. As Roland rose, attended by his sycophantic courtiers, Enleth sat back in her throne, and despite the protests of her advisors, the ones who urged her to deal with an unending list of mundane matters, she entered her trance. She waved the advisors away as the gentle fog washed over her, as she slid into a place outside of the world, outside of time, one where she could center herself, could soothe the omnipresent, ever-growing anger within her. Though she had snapped at the young dwarf, though she had scolded Roland publicly, they weren't the true target of her anger. No, far from it. She wasn't even angry at Maul. Not really. The man was a beast. He had always been a beast. So what else could she expect but beastly behavior? No. The one she was truly angry at, the one she held accountable for all of this, for every infuriating thing around her, was herself. She was the one who wasn't home when Maul freed himself. She was the one who wasn't there to defend her family. She knew she could defeat Maul in combat. He knew it better than anyone, but she wasn't there. If she had been, she could have put a stop to all of this right then and right there. that she hadn't been. She wasn't there. And what's worse, she had failed once again. Failed to catch Maul. Failed to stop him. Failed to put him down like the rabid dog that he was. And as a result, another world tree had sprouted up, had begun to reach across the sundered worlds. And though the exact effects of such a development remained unknown, one thing was certain. Those effects, whatever they were, would be catastrophic to her realm as well as all the rest of the sundered worlds. It wasn't entirely her fault. No, not entirely. Now, as always, she suffered for the failures of her subjects, the failures of those who worked for her, those who were meant to make her life easier. But inevitably, her subjects, those she trusted with even the most menial, simple tasks, they bent, they broke, and they failed. They failed her time and time again. How could she be expected to rule effectively? How could she be expected to do anything when everything she built must use such mean, crude, and useless materials as its foundation? It was a wonder that she accomplished anything. It was a wonder that anyone accomplished anything, because in the face of innumerable failures, supported solely by sycophants, cowards, and weaklings, there was one thing and one thing only that enabled her to hold them together, that enabled her to accomplish great things, to accomplish anything. Her indomitable will. Her royal will. The will that was her destiny and was hers by right. And it was that will that she worked to marshal and fortify within her trance. It was that will that she would use to solve the problems that confronted her kingdom. She used to think differently. She used to hold the throne, to hold her throne in high regard. She used to believe that it was her job to serve and to elevate her people, her responsibility to usher them into greatness. She had long ago realized that was but a hopeless dream. She had learned, depressingly, that the majority of her subjects had already fulfilled what meager potential they had. And she had learned that it wasn't her job, that it wasn't a leader's responsibility to elevate her people. She had learned that her job, her place, was the same as all great leaders. It fell to her, as it always must, to clean up the messes created by her subjects' failures. Maul was exhausted, but exhaustion didn't serve to fully describe it. What Maul felt was more than mere exhaustion. He wasn't merely tired or worn out. He was devastated. His body racked by a weakness that he had never known, a weariness that his savage body had never experienced. He knew that he was unspeakably weary, but he didn't know where that weakness came from. It could have been as simple as physical exhaustion, brought on by those interminable 14-hour shifts, the ones spent lugging load after load after load of that sickening gruel. The ones he spent trying not to look upon that thing, the monster, the titan, the one that lay upon the rocky ground, quivering and moaning, eating endlessly, devouring whatever was in reach as the proctor's sinister devices relieved the beast of its essence. Maul struggled not to look upon it, because to simply smell the beast, to inhale the noxious odor that hung heavy in that hot, humid, stale air, it nauseated him. But to look upon the Titan didn't just make Maul sick. It also filled him with a potent concoction, one that was equal parts dread, sympathy, misery, and revulsion, one that, like the endless labors that stretched out both behind and in front of him, only served to pile on more exhaustion. The brute felt sympathy for the beast, because he too had seen his essence ripped out of him by the proctors and their grisly instruments. They had extinguished the fire inside of him. They had robbed Maul of his very vitality, so it was no wonder that he felt exhausted. He felt unspeakably weary. Perhaps his weariness had come from his meals, had come from the putrid milk pulled from the Titan's spasming, gelatinous underbelly. It was all that the workers, that the slaves were ever given to eat, so Maul had to eat it, had to gobble it up, had to slurp it down quickly and get back to work, lest someone else take his meal and take his place. But no sooner did the milk reach his gut than it began to curdle, then it began to turn against him, poisoning Maul as it poisoned all of the slaves, even as it imparted what little nourishment that it held within. Or Maul's exhaustion could have come not from eating the poison, but from not eating the poison. Because that very day, as he took his brief respite, the one meant for devouring that rancid white liquid, Maul had surreptitiously poured that poisonous milk not down his gullet, but into one of the small glass vials he kept hidden within his rags. As Maul performed that daily dance, struggling to avoid looking at the Titan, while also avoiding its malformed, withered arms in their frantic grasps, he smiled. He smiled as he felt the vials, one full of that rancid milk and one yet empty, felt them clink together softly within the rags that hung loosely around his own quickly atrophying physique. His shift was almost over. Another reason for his all-consuming weariness. But Maul wasn't finished yet. As the slaves around him began to lay down their tools, Maul quickly, furtively took that second vial, the one yet empty, and filled it with the slop from his wheelbarrow, the gruesome porridge made from his fellow slaves. But as he focused upon the task, focused him on doing it quickly and efficiently, getting exactly as much of the slop as the wizard Patro had requested, as he focused upon doing it secretively so as to escape the eyes of those ever-watching proctors, Maul was struck from behind. It was a powerful blow, one that, even in his previous state, before his enslavement in that stinking, steaming purgatory, one that even then would have quite possibly knocked him off his feet. But Maul was not in his previous state. His body and his will had been degraded, and as a result, the blow sent him sprawling out upon the ground to the sound of a cackling, wicked laugh. "Out of the way, slave! You're wasting my time!" Maul panicked. Vials. Those precious glass vials. Those that had taken Patro weeks to procure. The ones that would take weeks more to replace. The ones that were vital to their plans. Crucial to Maul's very future. He had fallen directly upon his face as a result, busting open his broad, crooked, pugilist nose in the process. Maul had managed to protect his precious cargo. He smiled as he rolled over onto his back with both vials full and intact. But as Maul looked up, what he saw startled him into inaction. it was a monster. Not in size, for it was scarcely larger than Maul in his current state. No, this creature was monstrous in its aspect. Covered with bizarre muscles, ones that Maul had never seen on a human, ones that seemed to ripple under that scarlet red skin, even as the monster stood perfectly still, scowling down at Maul. That wasn't what truly startled him, what shocked him so badly that he was incapable of palming the vial into his rags while remaining undetected. No, what truly took Maul aback were the horns. No, not horns. Antlers. Gnarled and wicked, the likes of which Maul had seen numerous times before, the likes of which could come from one place and one place alone. The monster smirked as it spoke. What is it, slave? Got your fire back? Slowly, protecting the vials at all costs, Maul began to climb to his knees. You're mistaken. I am no slave. But before Maul could get his feet planted, the monster shot out a kick, striking Maul in the side and knocking him back down upon the ground. I said, stay down, slave! Maul sprawled out upon the ground once again. He had protected the vials. He'd successfully protected what was his, what he needed, what was essential. Now, he was faced with a choice. How to deal with this monster, with this insolent, arrogant fool, the one whose very tone, not to mention his actions, had earned him a death both brutal and terrible, a death that should be delivered by him, by Maul, by the one true king of flames and ashes. Maul knew that he could win, knew that even starting from a position of weakness, he could fight upward. He could topple that leering monster, could rip those gnarled antlers from his skull and beat him to death with them. He could shove those gnarled antlers down that fool's throat and laugh as he did it. He didn't even mind the blood streaming down from his broken nose. No, he welcomed the blood because he knew that if he rose to his feet, if he lunged at the beast, that the blood would fuel him, would awaken something within him, and he knew that once awakened, he would not stop. He could not stop until that monster had paid its due in full. But Maul also knew something else. That if he rose, if he fought, if he won, then the vials, those precious, rare vials, would almost certainly be shattered in the process. It was a loss he could not bear, so it was a risk that he could not take. And instead of doing what he should do, instead of doing what he wanted to do, instead of doing what he was meant to do, instead of rising and beating the breath from that insolent, arrogant fool, Maul simply slid out of the way, slid out of the monster's path, seething. That's right, slave. You've learned your place. Maul, narrowly keeping the rage locked down within him, responded slowly. I am a king. The monster cackled, striding past Maul and flashing a familiar, rictus grin. If you are a king, then I am a god. I hope you're digging SKALD. If you are, please give the show a good review on iTunes, as it's the best way to get the word out about the only story that matters. And if you write a good one, even if it's super short, I'll read it here on the show. Andorian Jedi keeps it simple, saying, always thrilling. A truly epic tale, expertly told. SKALD is completely free to download every single week. But I can't keep it going without your support. If you want SKALD to continue, if you want to continue hearing me weave this epic tale, head to patreon.com/SKALD today. Patreon allows you to pledge however much you want, even just $1 or $2 a month, to the things that you love. Patreon is the only way that I monetize my work on the show, so it's crucial that SKALD fans sign up. And sign up today. Patreon.com/SKALD. Please talk about SKALD on social media, and make sure to tag me so I can share your posts. I'm Aubrey Sitterson on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, and Snapchat. I am shameless, and I share all compliments. So get in there. You can also hit up aubreysitterson.com for links to everything, including SKALD, my wrestling talk show Straight Shoot, bio, contact information, and more, including 2016's best comic book, Street Fighter G.I. Joe, in stores right now. This week's recommendation is another podcast, a member of the phenomenal Dark Myths podcast collective that I am so very proud to be a part of. It's Sebastian Major's Our Fake History, a show that explores the murky intersection between history and myth, going in depth to discuss the myths that might just be true and the history that might have been made up. I recommend you start with episode 15, as it's the beginning of a 3-part series that touches on one of my favorite historical topics, the Trojan War. Thanks for listening. I'll talk at you next week.